From the soaring heights of the UK's most celebrated model aircraft empire to a quiet collapse, Keil Kraft was once the dream of every young aviator. Its planes flew from bedrooms to schoolyards, across clubs and competitions, shaping the imaginations of a generation. Celebrities of the sky, boys who would become engineers, designers, and makers, learned to build, trim, and fly their creations with precision. Yet, all that magic was eventually undone. Factories were emptied, tooling left to rust, and the brand that once inspired awe now survives only as a hollow name on foreign-made kits. This is the story of Ernst Keil, the man who would turn cardboard, balsa, and glue into Britain's most beloved model aircraft empire, and how it all fell apart. Ernst Keil started with nothing more than a cramped back room above a shop in London, a few shillings in his pocket, and scraps of wood that most people would have thrown away. There was no family fortune waiting for him, no factory ready-made, no contacts in the industry, just a stubborn spark of obsession that refused to be quieted. Night after night, gas lamps flickered across his plans on a worn wooden table as balsa shavings littered the floor and glue thickened on his fingers. He was a working-class man in a world that expected him to remain small, yet in that back room above the shop, he sat studying the air currents through an open window, listening to how paper and wood responded to wind, dreaming of creating model aircraft that could actually fly. It was humble, almost absurd, the kind of dream that most people would have abandoned after a week, but Ernst Keil possessed something different, a vision so clear that it seemed to pull the future toward him. The first real workshop came slowly, barely bigger than a living room, where Ernst worked alongside a small but dedicated team including a half-deaf designer named Walter who possessed an uncanny, almost magical feel for balance and aerodynamics. Their fingers were constantly stained with glue and oil, their clothes spotted with paint and varnish, their hair and beards dusted with fragments of balsa wood. In this cramped, noisy space filled with the smell of wood dust and engine oil and paint thinner, planes were born from endless experimentation. A wing tipped too far, and they learned to adjust. A fuselage too heavy, and they discovered how to lighten it. Mistakes became lessons. They tested engines on kitchen tables, watched propellers spin like hypnotic discs that seemed to contain all the mysteries of flight, and listened to the subtle whirring of rubber band motors. Here, in these tiny workshops, Keil Kraft found its signature style, a combination of precision, reliability, and a touch of elegance that other models simply did not possess. Necessity bred ingenuity, and their creations were not mere toys but instruments of imagination that could transform a child's afternoon into an adventure. As word spread slowly but surely through local clubs and schools, the company grew. A proper factory came into being, modest but alive with possibility, where wooden benches lined the walls and young workers barely out of school hunched over planes, sanding edges with patient hands and carefully fitting engines that would carry dreams into the sky. The air was heavy with the sweet sting of glue and paint thinner, and the warmth of freshly cut wood seemed to pulse through every corner. Teachers began to encourage students to build Keil Kraft models. Clubs in Manchester, Birmingham, and London started buying in bulk. Flyers and instruction manuals, printed on cheap paper, carried the Keil Kraft name across the country. Workers walked the factory floor with genuine pride, understanding that each kit boxed and shipped represented the weight of their effort and skill. Customers wrote letters of praise and gratitude. The empire, though still small, felt unstoppable, and everyone involved believed that this success would continue forever. By the 1950s, Keil Kraft models were everywhere you looked. Airfields thrummed with competition. Boys and girls, school children and hobbyists of all ages, raced to complete their kits and launch their creations into the sky. Clubs competed fiercely, and planes soared against the backdrop of open fields under blue skies. The brand had become a symbol of British ingenuity and craftsmanship that commanded respect across the nation. Magazines featured detailed articles on the Keil Kraft method, celebrating the company's approach to design and construction. The company began hosting exhibitions that drew crowds of enthusiasts from across the country. Young people who would later become engineers, designers, and pilots credited their first flights to the careful instruction and superior quality of Keil Kraft planes. Inside the factory, life had a quiet rhythm that was almost musical. The smell of varnish and oil persisted through every room and corridor. Engines tested on benches clanged and whirred with mechanical precision. Amid the constant noise, workers shared stories, celebrated small victories, and took genuine pride in shaping the imaginations of the nation's young people. The 1960s brought Keil Kraft to its absolute summit, a height that seemed as if it could never be surpassed. Queen's Awards for export lined the walls of the boardroom, testament to the company's growing international reputation. A new, purpose-built factory in Merton sprawled over acres of land, a cathedral to British manufacturing ambition and vision. Vertical integration meant that the company controlled everything, every piece of balsa, every engine, every component, from raw material to packaged kit ready for shipment. The workforce peaked at hundreds of dedicated employees, boys and girls, men and women, all working alongside passionate hobbyists who had made model aircraft their life's calling. Rock stars of the modeling world visited casually, chatting with engineers, inspecting prototype designs, sometimes even flying planes themselves. Exports surged to Europe, the United States, and Australia, spreading the Keil Kraft name across the globe. The smell of solder flux mixed with warm wood and varnish. The hum of motors and the clank of staple guns were constant, almost hypnotic sounds that defined the factory. Pride and confidence were tangible in every corner of the factory, in every worker's posture and smile. At the height of production, the Merton factory was a symphony of life and industry. The air was thick with varnish, with dust, and the tang of plating chemicals. Engines test-fired on benches, whirring like tiny heartbeats. Staple guns clacked rhythmically, paintbrushes flicked across surfaces with practiced precision, and soldering irons hissed as they fused metal components together. Young apprentices carried balsa sheets under their arms as older, experienced hands cut, measured, and glued with the skill of artists perfecting their craft. Each plane passed through dozens of careful steps, inspection points where quality mattered more than speed, before being boxed for shipment to waiting customers around the world. Workers moved with genuine pride, understanding that every kit they helped create represented far more than just cardboard and glue. It represented imagination, precision, and a legacy that stretched back to Ernst Keil's original vision. You could almost hear his voice above the machines, "Do it right, every time." Yet beneath the success and the pride, subtle cracks were beginning to appear, almost invisible at first but growing nonetheless with each passing year. Ownership changed hands. Profits were siphoned into unrelated projects that did not benefit the company. Pressure mounted to expand too fast, to cut corners, to prioritize growth over quality. Cost-cutting whispers began to reach the factory floor like an unwelcome wind. Some kits were simplified in ways that reduced their appeal. Some materials were replaced with cheaper imports that did not perform as well or feel as good in the hands of builders. Management meetings focused less on creativity and innovation and more on margins and profit percentages. Enthusiastic engineers became frustrated as their ideas were rejected for cost reasons. Young apprentices learned to compromise on quality in ways that troubled them deeply and made them question their work. The factory floor still smelled much the same, but the energy had shifted, slightly, almost imperceptibly at first, but unmistakably. In these small compromises, the slow degradation began, the kind of decline that happens not through a single catastrophe but through a long, painful retreat that would take decades. The decline accelerated through the 1970s as outsourcing began in earnest, spreading like a disease through the company's operations. Cheaper plastics replaced quality materials that had always been used. Foreign motors were substituted for carefully calibrated engines that had become the signature of the brand. Mass-produced parts began to replace careful handwork that had made Keil Kraft planes special and distinctive. Solid-state components replaced traditional engines that hobbyists had come to love. Japanese competitors arrived on the market, bringing their own precision and affordability that proved difficult to match with declining resources. Cultural shifts did not help the company's cause either. The pump generation emerged, drawing young people's attention away from delicate balsa planes and toward new, louder forms of expression. New electronics and synthetic hobbies offered alternatives to model aircraft building that seemed more modern and exciting. Each new owner of the company eroded quality further, transforming the beloved kits into faceless commodities that any manufacturer might produce. The workshops, once buzzing with pride and purpose, became quieter with each passing year. The glue and oil smells faded away. The human touch disappeared from the products entirely. And yet, the name remained, whispering a heritage that had been slowly stripped away until nothing of the original remained but the logo on the box. By the 1980s, demolition orders loomed from local councils like a shadow over the future. Distributors failed one after another, their faith in the brand exhausted. Bankruptcy became inevitable and unavoidable, a painful reality that could no longer be denied. Ernst Keil had long since passed away, and the last decision-makers faced the agonizing choice that no one wanted to make: close the factory, sell the land, and end the empire that had once inspired a generation of young people. The closure came quietly, almost with a kind of dignity that matched the company's humble origins. There was no dramatic fire, no scandal that made headlines, no sudden catastrophe that shocked the nation. Just locked doors, empty benches, and the faint smell of glue that lingered in corners and crevices where it had soaked into the wood over decades of use. Not through one catastrophe, but through a slow degradation that spanned years, the empire breathed its last breath. The factory itself was demolished and replaced by a retail park and a petrol station, as if the space needed to be erased completely from memory. The tooling rusted away into nothingness. The machines that once hummed with life and purpose were gone, melted down or discarded without ceremony. Workers scattered to find new jobs, new careers, new lives away from the model aircraft industry. Few testimonies were recorded. There was no plaque, no memorial, no sign marking what had been built there, what had been achieved there, what dreams had been launched from that location into the sky. Only empty space remained, and the faint, fading memory of what once existed in that place. The sound of balsa scraping against sandpaper, the whir of rubber motors, the laughter of children excited to fly their planes, all of it gone, erased as completely as if it had never been. Today, Keil Kraft exists only as a name on boxes, nothing more than a ghost of its former self. Kits are printed overseas in factories that have no connection to the original vision or values. The boxes carry the logo, but they do not carry the soul that once made them special. Quality, care, and craftsmanship are merely shadows of their former selves, pale imitations that disappoint those who remember. Collectors search for original kits from the golden years, recognizing immediately the difference between what was and what is now. Hobbyists mourn the loss of a connection to British ingenuity and craftsmanship that seemed irreplaceable. The brand survives in a kind of zombie existence, hollow, a ghost of pride and skill and imagination, a reminder of what was lost to time and indifference. What remains is subtle and almost invisible to the untrained eye. The planes that were once flown in parks and bedrooms across Britain still exist in the hands of collectors who understand their true value and significance. The craftsmanship and the vision of Ernst Keil survive quietly in stories and memories and in the faint hum of a motor spinning on a Sunday morning. British manufacturing, stubbornness, and passion left a mark that is almost impossible to seed but equally impossible to erase completely. The empire may be gone. The factory may have vanished. The workers have aged and passed on. Yet the sound of precision, the joy of flight, the satisfaction of building something with your own hands, these remain somewhere, preserved in memory and in the hearts of those who remember. Not through one catastrophe, but through a long retreat that spanned decades, the legacy endures, and in that endurance, there is both profound sorrow and undeniable beauty that will echo through time.